Welcome to the Kinky Connoisseur, where we talk about love, lust, consent, and everything BDSM, kink, and sex. Today, we're going to be starting my new series, Kinky Confessions, where I talk to you about personal experiences and stories that I've had in my kink and sex life. Today, we are going to be starting off the series with talking about the time that I auditioned to be a dominatrix. I kind of always wanted to potentially be a dominatrix. It was kind of always a fantasy that I had had. Once I realized that I wanted to get into kink and BDSM seriously, not only as a lifestyle, but potentially as also a means of income. So, my partner at the time knew a pro-domme, which pro-domme is the preferred term for people who are actually in the industry. It's not actually dominatrix, it's pro-domme. And she, told me a bunch of amazing things about what she had done and had encouraged me to audition at the only dungeon that we legally have here in the state that I lived in. And this particular dungeon, there was kind of rumors around how specifically her dungeon was legal, but other ones weren't, and that she had kind of a bit of a monopoly on the dungeon. And that was all kind of fascinating to me. Also, just the lore of the person who owned the dungeon, and then the dungeon itself. It had been around for a very long time in the city. And so I decided, what the hell, I want to audition. And so I created a website, I created all this like marketing collateral for it. And then I decided to call them up and schedule an appointment to see if I could come in and audition. And she said yes. And then we scheduled a date and time, and I decided to go. Outfit wise, I decided to wear something that I think would be appropriate to audition for a pro-dom position. I, particularly keeping to like my personal brand, I have a very kind of 1950s fetishist aesthetic that I really enjoy and really encompasses my personality. And so I wore this beautiful 1950s style dress and did my hair and makeup in a 1950s style. But as a kicker, to have a bit of a, sexy pro-dom flair to the outfit, I wore my 4-inch spiked Christian Louboutin heels that had a pointed toe and have T-straps, and they're covered in spikes, and these spikes are sharp. And they are the most expensive shoes pretty much that I have bought. I got them secondhand on eBay for quite a steal. They were in really good condition. All the spikes were intact, and the shoe fit me perfectly, and I was really, really happy to score them off of eBay. And they are the real deal. So I was just elated to have them, and I thought, where else am I going to wear these shoes to an interview? This is the because I always kind of like imagine like how fun that would be to wear these spiked Christian Louboutin shoes to an interview. And I was like, for a pro-dom interview, there you go, I can wear them here. So so I put those on with the rest of the outfit, and I strutted my stuff and got in my car and headed over to the dungeon. Now, the dungeon was located centrally in the city and not the best part of town. It was a very kind of industrial, more rundown part of the city. And she referred to it as a bit of a ghetto part of the city, and that it was zoned for sex work. So I pulled into their dirt parking lot and got out, and they had this big metal door with a peephole, and that was very intimidating looking, in like this warehouse type building that was kind of in the middle of nowhere in this particular part of this industrial zone of the city. And just from looking at it, you would never guess that it was a dungeon, right? And so I knocked, told them who I was. They let me in. And the person who answered was the owner of the dungeon. From everything that I'd heard of her and seen of her, I had imagined her that she was going to be dressed in, dressed to the nines in her dominatrix latex or whatnot and high heels, right? And no, she was dressed very casually, and I think she was wearing Crocs or some other very comfortable, unattractive shoe. I distinctly remember, and I was kind of disappointed that she wasn't wearing anything that was more exciting, but that was fine. I figured, she's not working on the floor right now with a client, so that makes sense that she's going to be more comfortable. So she let me in, and I remember the first thing she said to me was like, "Wow, you look really young. If you hadn't told me your age, I thought you were 12." And I was like, "No, I'm not 12. I am of legal age, and I've been in the BDSM community for at least, at that point, at least 6 years." And I was like, "I have experience doing scenes with all different types of men, with all different types of implements. I can do this if I want to." So she was like, "All right." So we went into a back room where they had dungeon furniture, and it was in one of the private dungeon rooms that wasn't being used. I don't think anybody was there that actually was doing a scene. I think she specifically scheduled me to come in when they had no clients there. So I go in, we sit down, and there's all this amazing, BDSM furniture, and the lighting is dim, and kind of all the things that you would think of when you think of a dungeon in your imagination, or what you've Googled if you've ever Googled, pro-domme spaces. And so that was really fun. And there was a lot of also 80s furniture and kind of an 80s vibe, because I believe that's when it opened was in the 80s or 90s. So it has been around for quite a long time, the dungeon, by the same owner. And we just got to talking. She asked me about my BDSM experience and what intrigued me to get into sex work, because pro-dom work is considered sex work. Sex work is not strictly just prostitution, as many people unfortunately think it is. That's not the only type of sex worker. People who do exotic dancing, burlesque, pro-dom work, even online sex work, such as camming, obviously porn work, and OnlyFans, Fansly, people that do work on those types of sites are all considered sex workers, whether they're doing it in a real space with a person in real life or they're doing it online. And so, yes, she asked me, why do I want to get into sex work? What intrigues you about this? Have you told your friends and family? Do they know that you want to do sex work? And basically I told her, the people in my life that are the most important, they're the people that I've told. Family, in my opinion, if you're a sex worker, that's a tricky slope. You can't always appease everyone, and not everyone needs to know what you're doing, in my opinion. Only the people that really matter, or that really are going to support you, I should say. Sure, your mom and dad might really matter to you, but are they going to support you doing sex work? Depending on your family. Most likely not, right? Unless you're very lucky. And I do know people who do tell their family that the sex work they're doing, and their family is very supportive, and they're very, very lucky. But unfortunately, I think most people are not. Therefore, I was like, yeah, I told the people that matter, and I've thought about this a lot. This is something I've always wanted to pursue. So let's talk about it. What does it entail? And so she started talking to me about everything. She also, asked for my ID. She was all very by the book, which I really appreciated. Wanted to ensure that I truly was of legal age. My photo in my ID and photo of me now looks a bit different. My hair color changed. I didn't have a 1950s hairdo when I went to the DMV to get my photo taken. So she was like, "Just want to clarify, this is you. And that you're not 12." Because I look very young for my age. So I can see why some people would be wary. They want to ensure that I am of legal age to work there, and legal age to be a pro-dom I believe, is 18 in most places, at least here in the United States. And so she then, asked me something else, which I thought was interesting. She was like, "Have you ever modeled before?" And I said, "No, I've never modeled before." And she was like, "Really? Not even a little bit?" I was like, "No, I haven't. I've taken a modeling class like in high school where I did some like generic walking on a little runway and doing just some etiquette stuff and learning how to do my makeup well and how to color coordinate things. That was about it, the little class that I took in high school that my mom made me sign up for, which now I was grateful to take it because I did learn a lot from it. But I was like, no, I've never actually modeled for money or anything like that. No. She was like, huh, maybe you should. And she like wrote some notes down. I was like, what did she write down about me? Had not modeled, but should model. Which always kind of surprised me because growing up, I always felt a bit of an ugly duckling. I felt like I was a bit of a freak. I am very petite. I don't necessarily look exactly like the girl next door, let's just say. So, but other people have told me also, especially when I have my 1950s aesthetic going, that, yeah, you could do some modeling. So it's like, huh, okay, something to keep in mind. Probably doesn't hurt if I want to advertise as a pro-domme. Especially if I wanted to do modeling in the fetish kind of sector of things, which I would. I'd probably want to do more fetish modeling. And so then she also talked to me about, what experience I have in BDSM, how long I've been in BDSM, and did I have experience doing bondage with partners? Did I have experience doing flogging and whipping and other types of pain play? How was I with older men? Could I handle myself with older men? And I said, yes, absolutely, I can handle myself with older men. Most of my relationships I've had have been with older men. And I'm going to make a whole video on age gaps and stuff too that I think would be very interesting. One of my longest relationships I was in about a 20-year age gap. He was about 20 years older than I was. So that was very interesting. And I learned a lot about domming from him because I would dom him. He was into chastity. He was into pegging. He was into all kinds of things that I spoke to her about when I was doing the interview. And so I convinced her. I was like, okay, yeah, she has some experience under her belt. Here at the dungeon, we still do train you. We go through all things with you so you feel prepared before you start. I think it was like a 20-hour type training that you had to complete before you started seeing clients one-on-one. And she talked about how you would get paid, how the screening is for clients, all of that really important stuff. And when I asked her also about pegging and other types of sex work related to that, she was like, well, it's a bit of a gray zone, right? It's penetrative sex. In most places, that would be considered prostitution. But you're not doing PIV. You're penetrating a man with a dildo, right? So that's a gray zone, which I found really fascinating. So we talked a lot about that. I was there about an hour and a half. And honestly, by the end of it, I wanted to tell her, yes, sign me up. I want to start training this afternoon. All of that. I was very enthused. The only thing that was stopping me was that the dungeon itself was quite worn down and did not have very good air ventilation. It looked like it had not been updated in a very long time. And they allowed fetish smoking in this environment. And I have really bad asthma. And even though she said, oh, we have a machine that sucks out the cigarette smoke, it was pretty clear from the moment I walked into the dungeon space that no, you can smell cigarettes, the years, if not decades, of cigarette use within the facility, and then the lack of just good air circulation, for me, was very compromising. By the end of that hour and a half, almost 2 hours really, that I was there, I was feeling ill by the time I left. And I spoke with some other pro-doms that had worked at the dungeon, and they agreed. They were like, yeah, it definitely needs an update. Yeah, the air quality is poor in there. So that is something you need to think about. It wasn't just me. And ultimately, because of my health, I decided to turn it down because I did not want to get sick from being in a space that I felt like I for sure would get sick very quickly from, and that I would not be able to work in that space. So that was very unfortunate. So a bit of a sad story of how I didn't actually become a dominatrix. However, I have started to do online sex work, specifically on Fansly. I just started, so it's still very fresh, very raw. Still trying to get all my shit together with that. But I wanted to do some online sex work. So I'm pursuing that. Fansly is very similar to OnlyFans for people who are not familiar with the term, except that Fansly actually really supports sex workers. It's a specific site just for sex workers, as is another site called Slushy, and there's more that are coming out that are trying to replicate OnlyFans, but are really there to support sex workers. Whereas OnlyFans has been quite wishy-washy with a lot of the sex workers I've talked about. They either, they don't put all their eggs in one basket and only use OnlyFans now. They do use Fansly and Slushy and other places just in case OnlyFans decides to ban them, because that has happened to some sex workers. So that is something that I'm working on and considering, and something that I'm starting. So I'll keep you in the loop and let you know. I'll probably make a whole video on my journey of that and how it's going once I get further along in it. Like I said, I'm right in the beginning stages of it. So, but that is my story of almost becoming a pro-domme. I still would love to pursue pro-domme work. It would just be in another location, in another state. For example, places such as California and New York, they have very different laws, and there are quite a few pro dungeons there, and they're completely, I believe, decriminalized and also legalized. In sex work, things aren't just legalized. A lot of times they have to be decriminalized first before then they can reach the legalized stage. And I can do a whole video discussing those terms as well. But in California and New York, there's a lot more options. Then with a lot of other states, there's either maybe one, maybe two dungeons in your state, if any, that are legal. So it is something to consider. It is something to think about before you decide to potentially pursue pro-dom work, right? So that's my little story. And if you want to learn any more details about the story, just let me know in the comments. I can always do another video on this. And I'm excited to continue my Kinky Confessions series. I have a lot of stories that I would love to talk to you about. And please subscribe and follow me on my socials. And I all hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.